The warnings came first, the proof came later. 3 real cases where a feeling, a vision, and a testimony no one should believe turned out to be right. At 1 a.m. on December 23, 1981, Judy Henson suddenly jolted awake in her bed in Valdez, North Carolina. Her body was covered in sweat and her heart was nearly pounding out of her chest. She could sense that something was very wrong. She strained her ears and eyes to focus on the dark room around her, but dread was welling up inside. As she began to panic, she turned and shook her husband Bobby awake. He too jolted upright and, like his wife, in a panic, asked what was happening. Judy was so anxious she began to tear up, and she paused for a moment and then looked at Bobby right in the eye and told him, "She's dead, Bobby, she's dead." Bobby did his best to calm her down and explain to her she's fine, this was just a bad dream, but Judy was very insistent. She knew exactly what had happened. She jumped up from the bed, grabbed the phone, and made a call to the hospital asking if a woman who fit a specific description had been admitted, but no one had. After making another unsuccessful phone call to a family friend, Bobby called the one place he knew where this woman had been earlier in the evening. They confirmed to Bobby that yes, this woman had left hours ago and was currently en route to her destination. Bobby did his best to explain to Judy that this was all confirmation she was fine. It took a little bit, but she was starting to believe she was mistaken. That is, until they got a knock at their door in the early morning hours. And when Judy opened it, it was the police, and she realized she had actually been right all along. A group of young men were driving along Interstate 40 right near the Mineral Springs Mountain Highway off-ramp. It was a late night, and they were cruising around enjoying their freedom. As they continued down the road, one of them pointed out that there was something strange near the ditch. As they got closer, they were correct. There was a car in the ditch with the engine still running, the headlights on, and the driver's side door wide open. Instinctually, they pulled over thinking somebody crashed because they saw a deer or something, and now they've gone to find help. After examining the car, they couldn't find any evidence to support an accident. From what they could tell, this car had rolled backward across the opposite lane and ended up here. One of them called out to the others because just a short distance away, while still in the ditch, was a woman. Immediately, they could tell that it looked like she had just laid down and went to sleep, but they knew just from looking at her that she was dead. All of them began panicking, ran back to their car to get the nearest phone and call the police. After police closely examined the scene, things weren't really adding up because this young woman was found lying on her back, but her arms appeared to be carefully placed at her sides. Additionally, there was no sign of a struggle or any blood or broken windows. And then they discovered what they thought had happened. After examining the trunk, they found a bullet hole. It had continued through the back seat, piercing the driver's seat, striking this young woman from behind. They inferred that she had been shot while driving and the car had rolled backward into the ditch after she was hit. But they also theorized that someone had pulled her body from the car and arranged it carefully in that ditch. This story gets even crazier. During the investigation, it was discovered that a couple who had lived nearby reported hearing a strange sound around 1 a.m. Just one though, and then other witnesses started coming forward. One saw a blue Chevrolet parked along the off-ramp about 200 yards from where this woman was found. The only thing they could really recall was that there were 2 men there sitting and waiting. Another witness saw something stranger. They'd driven past and seen a car on the road with the woman slumped over the steering wheel. Some man was standing at the driver's side door, which is interesting because later on they would find DNA evidence on that door handle that did not match this young woman's. Pairing that with what they found during the autopsy, which was this singular round bruise under her breast, all pointed to one thing. Together, these findings suggested that Rhonda had been shot in her car and then moved into the ditch. That woman was 19-year-old Rhonda Henson, and the strangest thing is that for weeks leading up to her death, she'd been living in constant fear. She had recently graduated high school and worked as a clerical worker at Hickory Steel, about half an hour away from her home in Valdez. She lived with her parents, Bobby and Judy, at Mineral Springs Mountain, and she'd been dating a man named Greg McDowell since her junior year. In the weeks leading up to December 22nd, everything had changed. She had become distant, secretive, and she started asking her father to accompany her on trips into town, something she'd never done before, but she told him she had something important to tell him but could never bring herself to say what it was. She even started taking showers in the middle of the night, and when her parents asked why, she said she felt dirty. One day, she had asked her mother a very strange question. Was it acceptable to date a married man? When Judy pressed her daughter about it, Rhonda claimed that she was asking for a friend, but mothers know. The night she had died, Rhonda had gone to a Christmas party. Hickory Steele was throwing it at the American Legion hut in Hickory, about 20 miles from her home. Her friend Sherry Pittman had convinced her to go. Greg wasn't attending because he had other plans. While getting ready for the party, Rhonda had 3 short phone calls with Greg. He initiated 2 of them. Each time, she took the call privately in her bedroom, and whatever they discussed, she did not share. At around 7, Rhonda picked Sherry up, grabbed another friend, and the 3 women went to the party, had a good time, and left around 11. Rhonda and Sherry got back to her house around 11:50, just before midnight, and Rhonda asked to use the phone. She needed to call Greg. Afterwards, Sherry noticed Rhonda was very visibly upset, and her last words before leaving were, "I had better go." She left the Pittman house and began driving home. Her route was Interstate 40 to the Mineral Springs Mountain Highway off-ramp. The off-ramp was less than half a mile from her own home. She never made it. The investigation focused on strange items found in Rhonda's car, the ones that weren't there when she'd left for the party. A leather jacket, a wooden bowl, a pink stuffed snake, which turned out to be a souvenir from a trip Rhonda had taken with Greg. Bobby had moved Rhonda's car earlier that day before the party, and he'd told her to clean it out. So those items hadn't been there. Someone had deliberately put them in the car after she'd left for the party. Someone who had access to them and knew where she'd be. Greg McDowell told police he'd been driving a burgundy 1981 Toyota that day. But of course, witnesses gave conflicting descriptions. Greg also didn't have a solid alibi for that night, but there was no physical evidence linking him. There was never a murder weapon and the DNA was never matched. But police found something else strange at the scene. Allegedly, multiple people, possibly 5, had been allowed to leave without being identified in police reports. Who were they? What had they seen? Investigators would later learn that at lunch on December 22nd, Greg had picked up Rhonda at work. Whatever happened during that lunch, whatever was said, it was the last time anyone saw them together. It's been over 40 years now, and who or what happened to her remains a mystery. But this isn't just some cold case. The idea that some fatal events were foretold about before or as they happen is actually found in numerous cases. On the evening of June 10th, 1994, Deborah Hoyt just couldn't sleep. No matter what she did, she tossed and turned, but her brain would not shut down. And internally, she felt that there was something very, very wrong. At around midnight, she decided to wake up her husband and tell them they needed to leave right now. They needed to drive home to Lake Tahoe. Her husband, of course, insisted she was being crazy, that because they were in Sacramento, it was going to take a while. I mean, after all, it was in the middle of the night, and they had already planned to leave in the morning. No rush. But she pleaded with her husband that something inside of her was pulling her to get on the road. They had to go see it. After convincing, they packed up and began driving east on Highway 50, which heads right into the Sierra Nevada mountains. It was around 2 a.m. when they reached Bullion Bend, which is a winding stretch of highway cutting through the forest. Deborah was in the passenger seat, watching the dark trees flash by, and then she saw her, a woman, lying on her side at the edge of the pavement, completely naked. One arm tucked under her head like she was sleeping, the other draped across her face. Deborah grabbed her husband's arm and was like, "Did you see that?" He had. They both had. But by the time he hit the brakes, they were already past her. He started to turn around, but Deborah stopped him. Something about the scene was wrong, and it terrified her. So they found a payphone a few miles up the road, and they called the police. Highway patrol officers rushed to the location within the hour, and they searched the exact spot Deborah described. They even searched the shoulders. They searched the embankments, but there was no sign of anybody having been there. Figuring it was a prank or maybe drunk college kids, they just didn't think too much of it and decided not to investigate further. But Deborah wasn't the only one, because over the next few hours, 2 other drivers called in with similar reports that a nude woman was on the highway near this area, But every time officers responded, they never found anything. The next morning, word of these strange sightings reached the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department. Deputy Rich Strasser had been working a missing person case, a young mother and her 3-year-old son who'd vanished 5 days earlier while driving through these same mountains. The mother's aunt had actually called the department with something bizarre, that she'd had a dream about a car in the ditch and the number 16. He drove to Bullion Bend in daylight, focusing on the area around mile marker 16, and he spotted it. A small black tennis shoe on the gravel shoulder, a child's shoe. He got out, walked to the edge of the embankment, and 40 feet down through thick pine trees and brush, he saw a flash of red metal. He scrambled down the slope with pine needles sliding under his boots. The red metal was a Hyundai, completely hidden from the road by the forestry. The roof had been torn off, and still inside, strapped to the driver's seat, was a young woman. She'd been dead for days, but there was movement in the back seat area. Curled in a fetal position on the floor was a small child, naked, covered in scratches and insect bites. Strasser checked for a pulse, and he was alive, but barely. After 5 days alone in that wreckage, 3-year-old Nick was still breathing. Paramedics claimed that he had maybe 1 or 2 hours left when he was found. He was currently in hypothermia and was severely dehydrated and malnourished. Even though his clothing was scattered around the car's interior, in his confused state, he had removed them all. Here's what investigators pieced together: that on June 5th, 23-year-old Christine Skubish left her parents' home near Sacramento with her son Nick. She was driving to Carson City to start a new life. She had just finished her paralegal certification and planned to marry Nick's father. Somewhere around 2 in the morning on June 6th, exhausted from the long drive, she fell asleep at the wheel. The car then drifted off the pavement at the Bullion Bend and plunged into the ravine below. Christine died on impact, but Nick survived. For 5 days and nights, this 3-year-old boy was trapped in the car with his dead mother, and he'd managed to climb out at some point. That's when he lost his shoe up on the road. He tried to scramble up the 40-foot embankment but slid back down on the pine needles. The nights up in this mountain are cold and the days are hot. He had no food, no water, but Christine never left the driver's seat. So who was the naked woman Deborah Hoyt saw on the road? When Deborah saw Christine's photo in the news, she gasped because that was her. That was the woman she'd seen lying on the highway. But there's a problem because Christine had been dead for 4 days by then, not to mention dead and still strapped to her seat 40 feet below the road. Some people think Deborah saw Nick, that maybe in the darkness, a small naked child could be mistaken for a woman, but she insists that's not what she saw. Others wonder if Christine's spirit was trying to flag down help for her dying son. Some reports suggest other drivers also called in sightings that night, though police never confirmed more than Deborah's. All of it near mile marker 16, the number from her aunt's dream. Today, Nick Skubish is in his 30s. In interviews, he's explained that he remembers a lot of the time he was out there. Christine's family doesn't really talk about what Deborah saw, but many wonder if Christine found a way to save her son. That somehow, in those final desperate hours when Nick was slipping away, she appeared on that highway, visible just long enough to make sure someone would look for him. The official report lists it as a tragic accident, but it doesn't explain how a dead woman appeared on a highway to save her son. In late February of 1897, Mary Jane Heaster couldn't sleep. Her 24-year-old daughter, Zona, had been dead for 4 weeks, and grief had completely overtaken her. Beyond all that pain was a feeling that something about the way she died wasn't right. On the day of her passing, her husband Trout Shue, the local blacksmith, left for work that morning. But he did something strange. He kept stopping by a local boy's house, Andy Jones, all throughout the day, asking him to go check on Zona. Just go see if she needs anything. Make sure she's okay. Andy thought it was odd. Trout had never asked him to do this before, but eventually he agreed. When Andy got to the Shue house that afternoon, everything was quiet. The house was dark, and so he called out for Zona but got no answer. He stepped inside, and that's when he saw her. She was lying at the foot of the stairs, perfectly still. Her legs were together, one hand on her stomach, the other at her side, and her eyes were wide open. By the time Dr. Knapp arrived an hour later, Trout was already there. He'd carried Zona's body upstairs to the bedroom, and he dressed her himself in a high-necked dress with a stiff collar that covered her entire neck. He'd put a veil over her face, and when the doctor tried to examine her, he wouldn't let go. He just cradled her head in his hands the entire time, rocking back and forth and sobbing, making it impossible for the doctor to properly check her neck. Dr. Knapp noticed some bruising, but with Trout carrying on the way he was, he couldn't do a thorough examination. So he just wrote down the cause of death as everlasting faint, but then changed it to childbirth, but there was no evidence she was pregnant. At the funeral, things got even stranger. Trout wouldn't let anyone near the coffin, and he'd placed a pillow on one side of Zona's head and rolled up cloth on the other. He'd even tied a large scarf around her neck and said it was her favorite. But when they moved the body to the cemetery, people noticed something disturbing. Her head flopped around in a way that didn't seem natural, like something was wrong with her neck. Zona's mother, Mary Jane, of course, had suspected foul play from the moment she heard her daughter was dead. When they first told her, she said something that made everyone uncomfortable. The devil has killed her. After the burial, Mary Jane took home the sheet that had lined Zona's coffin. She wanted something of her daughter's to keep. In Mary Jane's account, something impossible happened when she went to wash it. The water turned red, blood red. She tried boiling it, she tried scrubbing it, the stain would not come out. And for the next 4 weeks, she just prayed. Every single night, she got on her knees and begged to God to reveal the truth about what happened to her daughter. She needed to know. She needed answers. Late one night in February, her prayers were answered, but not in the way that she expected. Mary Jane woke up to find a woman standing at her bedside. The room was cold, the woman just stood there looking down at her, and Mary Jane couldn't really make out her face clearly in the darkness and in her, sleep stupor. But something about her was so familiar. Now, apparently, the woman came back the second night, and this time she spoke. But her voice was strange and distant. She talked about being angry, about someone being angry, about supper. The third night, she came back again and was clearer, and she said her husband had been furious. There was no meat cooked for supper, and he'd attacked her. He'd grabbed her by the neck, and she touched her own throat as she spoke and said, "My neck was squeezed off at the first joint." She returned a fourth night, which was the worst. She was so close to Mary that Mary could touch her, and she told her everything. The woman turned her head completely around, exorcist style, like an owl, to show Mary Jane exactly what had been done. If you hadn't guessed it, this was the supposed spirit of Zona. The next morning, Mary Jane went straight to the prosecutor John Preston's office and sat there for hours telling him about these strange supernatural visits. Preston was skeptical, of course. Ghost stories don't really hold up in court, but Mary was so specific and certain and so detailed about all the injuries. The neck squeezed off at the first joint, the complete rotation, and even the details about how she died and why. And so, humoring her, he sent investigators to ask around. They talked to Dr. Knapp, who admitted his examination had actually been rushed and incomplete, that Trout wouldn't let him properly examine the body, and they talked to neighbors who'd seen the strange way that Zona's head moved at the funeral. That's when they found out things about Trout. His first wife had divorced him for abuse, and his second wife had died under very mysterious circumstances just 8 months into their marriage. And now, by the end of February, Preston made a decision that shocked everyone. He ordered Zona's body to be exhumed. They dug up her grave, they brought her body to the local schoolhouse where 3 doctors would perform a complete autopsy. Trout was forced to attend. As they began, he muttered something that made everyone in the room freeze. "They will not be able to prove I did it." The autopsy took several hours, and when it was over, one of the doctors walked over to Trout with the findings. The neck was dislocated between the first and second vertebrae, exactly where Mary Jane said the woman told her. Her windpipe was crushed, and there were finger-shaped bruises on the throat. Ligaments were torn and ruptured. The doctor just looked at Trout straight in the eye and said, "We found that your wife's neck has been broken." And his response sealed his fate and said, "They cannot prove that I did it, but they could, and they did." The trial began in June, and the prosecutor tried to avoid mentioning the ghost because he had medical evidence now and he didn't need supernatural testimony. But When Mary Jane took the stand, the defense attorney made a crucial mistake. He tried to discredit her by asking about her visions. And Mary Jane looked him right in the eye and said, "It was no dream. My daughter came back from the dead and told me exactly how she was murdered. She told me her neck was squeezed off at the first joint. She showed me by turning her head completely around. And when you dug her up, you found exactly what she said you'd find." The courtroom, of course, was probably silent. And then the jury deliberated for about an hour. And guess what? They found Mr. Trout guilty of murder in the first degree. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he died only 3 years later. After the trial, people asked Mary Jane if she really believed her daughter's ghost had visited her, and she never wavered, not once, until her own death in 1916. She said simply, "I prayed for the truth, and the truth was given to me." So, was it really Zona's ghost who visited Mary Jane those 4 nights? Or was it just a mother's intuition so strong that it manifested as a vision that happened to be exactly right? The case of Zona Heaster Shue remains the only case in the United States history where testimony from a ghost helped convict a murderer. Today, the case is known famously as the Greenbrier ghost case. These 3 go beyond just your typical cold cases. I mean, all 3 experiences were intensely personal but proved accurate to be the real events. Sure, there might be earthly explanations. A dream that comes true could just be a chance. I mean, thousands of people dream of disasters that never happen. Occasionally, one will match an actual event by statistical fluke. What unites the Rhonda Henson murder, the Scoobish haunted highway rescue, and the Greenbrier ghost is a mystery that just challenges our understanding of coincidence. In each case, either the victim or someone close to them experienced a phenomenon that hinted at the coming or ongoing tragedy. A foreboding feeling, a spectral sighting, a revealing dream. These were intensely personal, yet they all proved uncannily accurate to real events. And if you speak to those who have lived through such experiences, their convictions are very real. Their stories, reported and documented, invite us to suspend disbelief just long enough to wonder, what if there are dimensions of the human mind or soul we can't comprehend? That what if there's truly something to premonitions after all? Love and respect to all the families and lost individuals that we've spoke about in today's cases. And because you guys made it this far, I want you to go ahead and comment down below premonition. So that way I know who made it to the end and who didn't. And if you guys enjoy storytelling like this, where we deep dive into strange cases of the mysterious and supernatural, what are you waiting for? Smack that like and subscribe button right now for more content just like this. As always, never forget, I love you all, keep an open mind, and I'll see you all in the very next episode.